Welcome to this week's deep dive. We got JoeyPots with us. Joe McCaffery. Potts. Joe Potts.
But
Big part of your life. Big part of
big
your
part of
life.
my
Tell us
life.
where does this deep dive find you? Which part of the world?
Well, I am in Massachusetts in the northeast of the United States, and about the farthest part east of Massachusetts on Cape Cod and Wellfleet. And yeah, so I'm way out in the ocean. And
You're born and bred there?
no, I was born in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is a metropolitan area north of Boston, about 30 miles. Um, and it was an old mill town. I think it's the second largest urban area in Massachusetts, and it which is not saying much. And I don't know. It's a small city, and I'm from there, and that's where I grew up.
Oh, cool. Potts. I own one of your pieces, but how did you give us a back give the lads a background as to what you do and how you got into it?
Well, I make pottery and I sell it out the front door of my studio. I have a gallery and a studio in Wellfleet. And I started when I was in high school. I never much wanted to do anything else. Um, I finally got myself out of college. I graduated from art school and college. I did most of it in liberal arts and then a couple of years of studio courses. I banged around Boston for a while. And somewhere around the time I was 29, I got to the place where I knew that I had to do it to the best of my ability to see if I could do it, or I was going to regret it for the rest of my life, which is something I know a lot of people that want to pursue a creative career
Yeah.
come to a place. You're either going to do it or you're not, and you're going to do it until you can't do it anymore. Um,
Yeah. What's the term? You got to go balls deep, or you
you only
can't sort
got
of muck
what?
around. We say here you got to go balls deep. You can't tippy toe around it. You got to
Absolutely.
make
And
a
you got to
decision.
be on the line and you got to take all the conditions. I mean, I didn't say I was going to do it if I made a certain amount of money or I'm going to do it, if I get a certain kind of recognition or I'm going to do it if, people like me or whatever. I said I was going to do it until I couldn't do it anymore and that I had to go get a job in the supermarket so that I could eat. And when I took all the conditions off it, I started in a little studio that I rented some space in. I brought some work with me, and people started to buy it. Um,
Cool. Out of interest, were you making for the public or were you making for yourself? In other words, did you have a commercial idea in terms of this is what the market's looking for, or did you just start making things that you enjoy?
I started making things that I enjoyed,
Yeah.
and as time progressed, I did make a lot of things for no other reason than to make money and to sell them. And in the last 5 years, I've worked sort of hard to change it back to just making things that I want to make.
Yeah,
Uh,
but different stages of life, though, Joe, as well. I assume when you've got a mortgage and bills to pay, you need you need to move product, and
I
now
needed
a
to
different
move
stage of
product,
life.
and
Yeah,
you know, um, yeah, so I started making stuff in Wellfleet and I did it. And a couple of years after a little while after I started in this town, I met the woman that was going to become my wife. About 2 years later or so, we got married. Somewhere around that time, we found another space that I could rent. And I moved into my own studio and my own space, and I borrowed a few bucks and I got it up and running, and it sort of made me. It was in a good location. There were things about it, and I had a sign in the center of town, and it sort of made me. And I worked all the time. I worked nonstop. Um, Except when I bought a little boat and I did some fishing, but I'm talking about a 12-foot boat, a 14-foot boat.
Yeah,
And
yeah, a real
you
one.
know, it was big enough, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and what was I going to? So somewhere around 2022, became apparent I was going to lose my lease. And
Yeah,
I didn't want to buy that building. So we looked around. And again, my wife came to the rescue and she found this property that I'm sitting in now, which had a building that they used to repair refuse trucks, like garbage trucks. The guy drives around and picks
yeah,
up trash barrels. Yeah. Um, that the guy used for fixing his trucks, and it had a little house that he used for his offices. And we bought it and we renovated it. We mortgaged up the house that we already owned to the hilt. And I've been in this place for 21 seasons. So, 3, 11, and 21 is 35 years. And,
wow.
it's been a life.
Yeah, it has. Actually, I should let the lads know. I actually own one of Joe's pieces. It's a beautiful piece. Dee loves it. I love it. And actually, our whole we're just doing our home decorations, our renovations now, and the whole color scheme is greys and golds. So that piece of yours will be on display because it's got a beautiful grey nature to it. How would you describe your work, Joe, in terms of your style? Do you have a certain style? Would you say?
Well, I'd like to say that I have my style, but most of what I do is really stuff that I rip off from other people and I make it my own, you know.
Brilliant.
And that's a famous thing that, bad artists borrow and good artists steal, and that you take it and when you steal it, you make it yours, right? And Picasso said that, right?
Hmm.
I believe. I'm gonna quote a lot of things. You're gonna be able if somebody fact
I'm
checks me.
not fact checking, Joe. I'm not fact checking. That's
Yeah,
okay.
hopefully I'm not gonna get fact checked. But at any rate, I what I've done is sort of an amalgamation of what's called studio pottery and production pottery, and the difference between what I do as a studio potter, which means versus what somebody would call art pottery, which is art pottery is made by teams of people and there's a lot of, and they'll make additions of things. I make everything with my fingers. I either make them on a wheel or out of slabs or things like those kind of methods. And I work all by myself. I make the work and I put it out front and I sell it. And, for a long time, um, did I have a style? I don't know. I didn't really have a style. When I figured out I could make money, I definitely met the market halfway because I wasn't teaching anywhere. I didn't have, and the ideal sort of thing would have been to have gotten a master's degree and try to teach in a university. That really is sort of, but those jobs, it was starting to dry up when I was coming along, and I wasn't really cut out academically to do stuff like that. So I made a lot of work. I met the market halfway. And for a long time, I made about 1,500 pieces a year and sold them.
1,500 pieces by hand solely. That's a lot of
Well,
pieces.
I use this example all the time. A buddy of mine, I have a buddy that's a dentist and he just retired. And he had to send out an email to all the people that had been through his office to tell them that he wasn't going to work anymore. And he sent 5,000 emails. Okay. And he's a country dentist. It's like people don't realize it's like how many cigars do you sell? How many patients do you see? How many pots do you make? How many miles of road did you build? It's like it adds up over time. And it's not really that impressive once you know what you're talking about. It's just to the untrained, to somebody that's new to it, says, Jesus, that's a lot. I couldn't do that. Well, you don't know how to do it.
Ah, good point.
you know?
Good point. I think my whole my whole pot making career was an ashtray. I think when I was in grade 5,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's how most people's introduction was in art class. I was hopeless at art. I just never had a feel for it. But you
Well,
can't be
some
good at
people do,
everything.
you know, and I always say it's like playing the piano. It's like, you know, nobody
Yeah,
ever expects to sit down at a piano and know how to play it. It's like it's not part of any culture. It's like, you know, that it's going to be difficult to do that. You know, sometimes, but you can make something with your fingers, you know, and if it comes out, you know, it's a great thing. So I always tell people it's a good habit. It's a ridiculous way to make a living.
yeah. Did you ever teach? Did you ever teach art classes?
Every once in a while, I give a workshop like at a community arts center or to a group of people that are looking for somebody to talk, but not much. And my wife reminds me that I work by myself without employees quite often. That you know, I'm kind of what's the word for it? I'm kind of cranky. You know, I don't really have a lot of patience for, you know, the same question over and over and over again.
You should run a forum.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, what are you smoking there? Out of interest.
that's a Monte Cristo Double Edmundo. And I picked that particularly for this because this when I started smoking cigars, I decided that 6 inches by 50 was the perfect size for a cigar. It was it, and the cigar that I took to was an Avo number 2, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What year are we talking?
99, 98.
That was a good period. That was the end of the first boom, or of the first modern boom.
Well, I might have been around for the boom around here. I mean, they were advertising cigars on the radio. I listened to the radio all the time. I called up a cigar store, you know, that's 80 miles away or something like that, and I said, "Send me some good cigars. Send me 5 good cigars." So they sent me 5 good cigars, and I said, "All right, this is good." So I called them up again, and I said, "What's good?" And he said, "Ooh, the Avos are good." So I got some Avos, and around that time, the internet was starting to come on and online shopping, and I have this a studio that was big enough, and I started a card game. So there were about 6 guys that came to play cards, and we played every Tuesday night for 15 years. We traded the same $20 for 15 years. And my development and getting into buying cigars came from that because I used to buy cigars and hand them out, and if I bought a bunch of cigars, if I bought some Fuentes, I figured they were $6 and someone would give me $6 for them, and that was the way that worked. So we did that, and 2 of us still smoke cigars, but the game's been over for a while. But it was during that time that I learned. Oh, what happened was once I started smoking cigars too, and I would say in the turn of the century, so say 99 to 2000, I had a friend, still have him. He lives in Toronto and he has a summer house here. And he would go into a cigar store right around the corner from his office and he would buy me cigars and he would bring them to me and I would give him pots, right? Ray Hansen. And so, he would bring all kinds of different stuff, and I got it, I got my feet wet there. And amongst one of those cigars, which were ill kept and poorly stored and oftentimes not very good, somewhere in there, I smoked a cigar and I said, "Oh, this is what they're talking about." And I got a taste for Cuban cigars.
I was going to say, if he's from Canada, they would have been mostly Cuban at the time. You would have been getting.
Yeah, I know. I
And
remember the name of the place. It was a little hole in the wall place, downtown Toronto by the big old it's not the big market, the big public market in downtown in the old train station. I think it is. The place was called Shopsy's, and Ray would bring me cigars. Yeah, and
Isn't it
you know, and
amazing?
they
Yeah.
were murderously expensive too. They were just the Canadians. What they put up with is unbelievable. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, it's amazing. You smoke cigars, and you don't take it too seriously. I think it's how we all started. And then you smoke that one cigar that changes everything. And I don't think you can ever define the place, and you can ever sort of. It just happens. It just happens. And I think most people remember that cigar, that one that kicks off the slippery slope that we all end up on. But you've been a Monte Cristo. I know you like your Monte Cristo Double Edmundos. And
Yeah.
but what I mean, what are your favorite cigars, Joe? What do you normally go to? What do you gravitate to? And do you still smoke? Do you still smoke a lot of non-Cubans?
No, I didn't smoke any non. Once I got the Cuban bug and I started to buy them, first I was buying them from Cyprus. Somebody told me about that. And then I started buying them from Ravi. And I bought a lot of cigars over the years. And, I'm talking about, so back in the early part of this century, you could go online and a dealer might send you a stock lift and you could buy, a box of Hoyo de for, $250 in a 50 cab, and they had 4 years on them, right? So people people that are coming in now would be a little bit shocked at what it used to be like. I almost brought out a Siglo 6 that I bought from you, which was early on when I first find out that you could get cigars from Australia. And, you could get a 10 or a Siglo 6 for $200,
Yep.
Which means that a full box was 500.
That was a
Right.
lot of money. It still
Al,
is a lot of money.
it was a lot of money if you don't have it, at that point.
Yeah.
But once I started making a little money, it wasn't a huge thing. But I was careful about what I bought. So what do I reach for? I reach for Monte Cristos. I reach for Upmans. I reach for I reach for what's smoking well because I have a bunch of stuff in some Tupperdoors. And when they get to a point where I like them, I might have 4 boxes that I'm smoking out of. So I'm smoking a box of Double Edmundos. I've got some Specials #2. I've got a box of Epi 2s. I've got a box of let's see. I got a box of Siglo 4s. I got a box of Siglo 3s. And I might have a box of Coros in there, but they were never my favorite one. So I got a fair amount of nice cigars. I don't have a huge backup after that.
Yeah.
But well, I got enough. But I have in the last year started mixing in non-Cubans, and I didn't smoke any non-Cubans for 20 years, maybe 20, 22, 23 years. It didn't occur to me. I didn't need to. I could afford them. And remember Van, I was sitting in a lounge in Boston with Van, and he said, I smoke Cuban cigars. That's it. And I said, all right, I'm in for that. And
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
was no need.
There was no need. I mean, friends of Habanos, yeah, friends of Habanos. That's what we did. We smoked Cuban cigars. That's what we
Yeah, we
sold. We
smoked Cuban
sold Cuban
cigars.
cigars. We smoked Cuban
And
cigars.
the cigars that I smoked, and yeah, so that's and what I mostly chase down are regular production cigars that people are saying are good at the time. So, and I usually hang on to them. Not so much that they need to age, but it takes a long time for them to get acclimatized to what I want them to be. all of my stuff now is soaking wet. It's so freaking humid around here. And that's the big problem that I deal with, is trying to keep, I've got a dry and dry packet inside my desktop, which is where I keep the cigars that are ready to go. Because I take that thing out and 2 days later, the whole thing is up to 70%.
Yeah.
And that's really the big problem that I deal with. And it took me a long time to understand that it was moisture, not time, that affected the flavor of the cigars. And that really, it makes them harsh. When the cigars are very harsh when they're wet. And duh, because I'm out here by myself and I don't know. It took me a while to learn that.
So, so you got to desktop the dry box, yeah? That's
Yeah.
all it's used for, just the dry box, and
Mhm.
that works well.
It does.
Yeah, all you need. It's not that complicated, Joe, and I think and you can see it. A lot of guys in the cigar world are OCD, and I don't think you're an OCD sort of guy in
No,
terms of cigars. Either am I.
no.
I could never live in a world where my phone gets alerts of the humidity levels, as some guys do on the forum, and I love you guys, but I mean that's one step too far. I don't particularly care if my humidity goes from 62 to 65, but it'll come back down to 62. It doesn't particularly worry me, but I love my cigars at around that 62 humidity. I mean that's
That's
where
right.
I like it. I
That's
love them
right.
down there.
That's
You
right.
know,
And because I didn't for a long time, for every box, I did the thing. For every box that I would buy one that I would smoke. I would buy one that I would put away. And I did that for a long time. So that's where my stash comes from. And now I'm hoarding it compared to what it was back in the days. And now I bought some Bond Robert stuff and some Fabrica 5 stuff. But it used to be when people would come and give me cigars that they got that, perfectly fine Dominican and Nicaraguan cigars or stuff. I would save them and I would give them to my friends when they came over.
okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. I know what it's like. Do you when you work, do you smoke and work at the same time?
I do not.
No.
I do not. And I smoke at specific times.
Yeah.
So usually I smoke on Sunday afternoon if I can get away with it. And I smoke in the house, usually watching a ball game or, before dinner, Sunday dinner. And we usually do something like that. And then I have one or two during the week when I'm doing, like, on Tuesday. Some guys might come over on Friday afternoon, stuff like that. But I don't smoke every day, and I rarely smoke two cigars in a row. Um, and, I smoke probably between two and three cigars a week, and I've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the biggest changes that you've noticed? I mean, you've been smoking now for close enough to 25 years. What's the biggest change outside of price? The biggest change that you've noticed in your Cuban cigars? Have you noticed the change?
The
People talk about,
cigars are far more accessible young.
yeah,
So that, it used to be when I first started doing this that it seemed like some of them would really hit you over the head. The first, I used to think that, you haven't really had a good cigar until you puked, and I remember smoking a Coro on New Year's Eve one time, and it was so strong for whatever reason. I get home and I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was the cigar because I wasn't drinking. It was the cigar, and I felt so sick, and it all came up. And then I learned that the way that you get rid of that is with like a tablespoon of sugar, or you drink a Coca-Cola or something like that. That sugar helps
yeah,
with,
yeah, yeah.
but that they would make me nauseous. And I know that that's nicotine. Um, but I haven't had anything like that for a very long time. And it happened 3 or 4 times in the first 10 years. So,
Wow.
but I think
We
they're
did.
more approachable.
I remember doing a vertical tasting of a 2000, a mid 1990s Partagas 898, and one from, I think it was 2017.
Yeah.
And the 2017 was so far superior to the one from the mid 90s, and only because the one from the mid 90s was still ruthlessly strong. It was just
Ruthless.
completely unbalanced. And people would say, yeah, this got years and years. It's got so many legs left to go, and they're probably right, or it may never come right. I'm not quite sure, but some of those cigars were just, I use the term again, ruthless, and I never quite got that.
Yeah, and it's never appealed to me. I mean, maybe I don't have that strong a stomach, but it is funny though that the first that size, that Dahlia Vitola, that's the first box of cigars I ever bought, Cuban cigars I ever bought online. And somebody told me to call up to get in touch with a shop in France or something, and they sent them to me with the boxes and the bands, and they used to do this.
Oh yeah.
And I had those for a long time. Yeah, I think I think
Did they ever come good? Did they ever come good? Those
I think
products?
they did. I think they
Yeah.
did. And they may not have been as young as what you were talking about, because this was probably into the 2000s. Um, but I think that there was a period of time there, and it still is, that the construction was so horrible of a lot of cigars. I mean, I remember buying a box of Upman Monarchs, which, I thought would be great to have around, and every single one of them was unsmokable, and they were unsmokable for years. They never came around in the humidor. They never got down to 62, 61 relative humidity. They were just a bad product, and that I haven't seen anything quite like that in a long time. But there were times, it's very disappointing, and it's hard to cope with the fact that you're dealing with an inconsistent product
Mate,
at best.
I started in 1995 retail, and I almost gave it away in 1998, 1999. I almost gave it away because to this day, I suspect that 10 to 15% of the product that I was receiving was was flawed, was almost unsmokable.
Yeah, it was
You know,
defective. It wasn't like in need
no,
of time. It was
so
defective.
double Coronas like this were just dowels. You couldn't
Yeah,
get anything through.
yeah.
And I remember, I think it was Hunters and Francoeur had a meeting with Habanos back in those days, just to complain, and they put a 50 cab. I think it was Hoyos, 50 cab of Hoyos on the table, and said, find one of those that can draw. Just find one. And there was a beautiful cigar, Punch Super Selection Number One, that came in 50 cabs. Love that cigar. If you could find one that drew properly. And I could never quite work out why it was so bad. And then, of course, look, in retrospect, they almost got to 200 million cigars during that period of time. And they were just rolling and rolling and rolling. But there was so much rubbish that was coming through. And people today will disagree. People will say, I've never had an issue with cigars from the 90s. I think it's overblown. Rubbish. You had to live through that period of time to see some of the appalling quality control that was there. And look, today you've got, I think you've got more of a chance of finding an underfilled cigar than you have an overfilled cigar today. But awful
Well,
times.
there are a
Actually, it's
lot of
interesting.
cigars that people have raved about that I couldn't stand because they were underfilled. And one of them was a Trinidad Robusto tea. I had a box of those. I mean, it was unbelievable how underfilled they were. And I mean, they didn't, I didn't know that you could weigh cigars back then, but they didn't weigh anything. They were terrible. And people would say, well, they're so great and they're this, that, and the other thing. And I'd read that and I'd think, well, I'm not buying any of those. I got screwed out of $350 on that box. So, or whatever it was, they weren't cheap even
That's
back
about
then,
right.
you know.
No,
But I will say this. that when all of that was going on, I had one of those Minron knee books, the history of post-revolutionary Cuban cigars. And he wrote in there that tobacco is hygroscopic and that it becomes less so as it gets older. And that as you age cigars, they can calm down and they can lose their ability to attract moisture, and they can draw more easily. And an early box I bought was a box of Esplendidos, which back then was about $400, and that was a stretch. I mean, I made sure my wife didn't know about that one. And those cigars, I think it took me 15 years to smoke the last one, and the last ones were exceptional. And they drew, and they had fine ash and everything. And so that is a case of something that was terrible that did come around.
Yeah, no, I've got a room downstairs at the office, which is cigars I put aside because they were just so plugged that I couldn't retail them. Because back in those days, if you retail plugged cigars, like a full cabinet of plugged cigars, well, then you're just gonna have to refund them and get them back or whatever it's going to be. So I just put them away. And going back now, what's that, 98? So going back 22 years, all of a sudden, those bands, if they've got bands, the bands are super loose. That they and I'm getting a draw out of them. Well, some of them, and like most of them, they're smokable now, and they smoke well. But
Yeah, well,
I don't want to
yeah.
wait 20 years, Joe. I mean,
No.
I don't want to wait 20 years to smoke
20
a cigar.
years, yeah, I mean, it's not reasonable. It's just, it's not reasonable. And, the only reason I wouldn't smoke something for 20 years was because it was too expensive and I thought it would be good for a special time. But I'm almost 66, so it's getting to be special time all the time.
Oh, well, that Siglo 6 that you've got, how often do you smoke a Siglo 6? Is that one of your special cigars? I mean, now that they're roughly $200 each,
I think I got a
where
box. I think I got 5 of them left. And,
yeah,
I know that I'm going to smoke them before they get to, before they get before they go over. I keep them sort of in a spot. There's not much air circulation. They're not in bags or anything, but I don't fuss around with them and expose them to too much oxygen. So I think that they're still pretty good. And I think they're 2006s, something like
one of
that.
the early ones. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I do too is if I get to the end of a box of cigars that I really like, I'll take the last couple of them and I'll put them in tubes. And I have a whole drawer in a cabinet that's got a bunch of tubes that have cigars. There's a couple of, I don't know, there's about 25, 30 of them in there. And some of those are really good cigars. They're really good. And nothing, just a 2006 Ras and an old Sir Winston, that kind of stuff.
That's good. Actually, I was with Rob Fox in Limassol. We actually went to a Italian restaurant in Cyprus, and it's only last month. And I found this double Corona in a small humidor on the bar of the restaurant, and it was wrapped in cellophane. And I said, Foxy, I've got to buy this. I've got to buy it. It was €30, so I bought it, and because I wanted to see if it was real, and it was real. And I thought, well, how the hell is it in cellophane? And of course, I didn't realize that cigars are so rare in that part of the world at the moment that they're actually selling them. They're breaking up boxes and selling them as sticks to restaurants, and they're wrapping them in cellophane. Who would have thought we would have got to that stage? Because Hoy the Maestro double Coronas have always been around as far as I've been in this game.
Used to buy Lusitania cabs for the guys at the card game, and we'd all pitch in for them and smoke them, and we'd buy, a cab every year and have them around. We'd smoke them all the time. It was just a matter of they were just, and now people are talking about that these cigars are, the greatest thing that's ever been bought in. And it's just a different world. And I'm lucky I lived through and had that kind of access. And I can't really fault the Cubans for knowing that They have the best product in the world, and I do believe that there is nothing like Cuban tobacco. That you can make a good cigar, but it's not going to be like a really good regular production Cuban cigar. There's a difference, and I can taste it almost all the time.
It's the best tobacco in the world, Joe.
It's the best
The
tobacco
best
in the world.
tobacco in the
There's
world.
just no getting around it. And it doesn't mean, and I'm not a guy that has to have the best of everything by a long shot. I mean, but I've had a lot of good cigars. And I enjoy the shit out of them. I really like them.
What advice would you give to yourself if you were starting again?
You mean about cigars? About
Yeah,
cigars.
well, I guess cigars and some takeaways. I'm going to start with cigars. I'm going to ask you the
Well,
same question about business. Let's start with cigars. If you were to start
yeah,
again,
I don't want to get to be gauche about it. So maybe you can cut this out, but I have about 1,000 Cuban cigars. So that's 40 boxes. A lot of guys have way more than that, but that's a medium-sized collection in my mind. And I don't think I would do too much different. Nobody knew, in 2015 that, this was going to happen in the early 20s, that they were going to do this to Cuban cigars. But I went to a lot of trouble and was conscientious about it, and I don't think I would do too much different. I really don't. I think you should buy cigars and smoke them, and you should, when you find what you like, you should save them, and
yeah,
have extras, and so that you can lay them down and have some for a rainy day. Um, should give them away to your friends, and don't buy L's, edition limitadas, and don't buy too many regional editions. And you don't need to smoke bahikis. It's there's a lot of, you don't have to have the very best ones. If somebody gives you an Esplendito, which used to be a great cigar, but they used to hand them out at banquets. I don't know how they would do that anymore. My friend Ray used to come back from Toronto. He'd be at a business banquet. He'd give me two Esplenditos. He said they gave these to us at the bank. Um, I would smoke them and save, and buy extras. That's what I would
yeah.
do.
I think that's one of the things that I miss, and I think it's one of the things that I'm seeing more and more often is people aren't handing out cigars like they used to.
Well, I wonder why.
Yeah, because I was a lot like you. Boys come up on the deck on a Friday. Everyone brings a bottle. There's Cohibas being passed around, or Lusitanias and this.
Yeah.
And now you do the same, and you're out $500 or $600 or $700 worth of stock.
Right.
So,
Or
but
more.
I even noticed when I was in Europe recently at events, people aren't swapping cigars or sharing their cigars as they once did. And I think we're losing something because of that. I think the gifting, the sharing, it was always such a integral part of this hobby. And I think one of the best parts of it, and I'm pretty sure that it's not going to come back like it was. Uh, yes, you can gift away your a D4. Look, even a D4. I gift a lot of D4s. I gift a lot of Rasses, etc. Uh, but I can understand for a young guy starting out, giving away $25, $30 cigars is not easy. It's
No. And
they used to be six bucks.
and
They used to be $6 until 10 minutes ago.
yeah.
Uh, and it just changes the game.
Yeah, it does. It totally changes the game. And yeah, I think if I was going to do something different, I wouldn't smoke the cigars when they were too fresh. I wouldn't do any of this right off the truck stuff. I wouldn't do any of that. I don't think I think the cigars get jet lag. I often thought that like the cigars that come from you, they go from Havana to somewhere in to Hong Kong, right? Then they go to Australia, and then they come back to the United States, and by the time they're done with that, they have jet lag, right? That's what I call it. And they need time to recover, just like you do. And I wouldn't smoke too many cigars right off the truck. I would let them sit, and I would let them sit for as long as you can, 6 months anyways. And that's hard when you don't have a lot of cigars. But once you get a few, you can buy a box of cigars and you can put it away, and that's one of the things that I would do differently. And I wouldn't sell the cigars that you have on any online forum. I would keep them, right? Just,
No, I I'd agree with that. I think rest is important. Smoke smoke fewer cigars. Smoke better cigars. Smoke
yeah, you
fewer,
can't
and
taste
better's
what you smoke.
not LA. Like I can't remember the last time I had a limited edition that I have purchased myself and smoke. I just don't get it. I just don't get the utility out of it. I'd much prefer to smoke a D4 or Especial or Monte Cristo Especial, which I love, or a Trinidad Fundadores. To me, that is the ultimate of cigars.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's enough. That's good enough. I don't, don't buy a box of cigars that comes in a humidor that's worth more than the cigars are. They're doing this. They're doing it a lot. They're making them very expensive, and then they're putting them in these beautiful boxes, and the packaging has got to cost a lot. And there was a reason why an old 50 cab of Lusitanias, in a cedar box, that was a box of cigars. Now, they're selling the sizzle and not the steak, as they say. It doesn't really it doesn't do something for me. The packaging, I'm suspicious. Why do they have to? If it was that good, they wouldn't have to dress it up so much.
You're old school, Joe. You're old school. Yeah. But
Yeah, well,
it's true.
I'm from.
It's true. So, what advice would you give to people who are starting out in business, Joe? You've been in business for a long, long time.
If you're going to go and do your own business, you got to. For me, if you have a passion and you want to follow it and you want to be in business, you have to invest in yourself. So you can't have a good, in your first couple of years, if you make some extra money, you can't really I couldn't take a vacation. I couldn't see doing things with the money that I earned early on. I put it back into the business and I did it for years. I didn't take a vacation where I got on an airplane for about 10 years. I didn't drive a new car. I didn't have a car that had air conditioning in it until I was well into my 40s, right? I had an old pickup truck that I drove around. I took care of it. It was fine. But, I just didn't spend money on that stuff. So the big things that are going to crush you, in my mind, as far as expenses are automobiles and vacations. And you should just find a way around that early on. I needed to keep reinvesting. Now, I wasn't in a high margin or a very lucrative profession, but and you just had.
I think you've nailed it. I think you've nailed it, Joe, and that I think you've got to keep your lifestyle sane. I think buy an appropriate house, buy an appropriate car.
Yeah.
If you're going to invest in relationships, invest in friends, invest in
Yeah.
good people. And I think I gave a little bit of a talk a couple of weeks ago to a business group. And I said, honestly, I think one of the most important things which determines your success is marrying right, is finding that partner who's going to be part of your life for the next 25 years. Because you're never really in business by yourself. You're in business with the people around you, and then no one's around you more than your wife or your husband. They're there every day. You need someone who lifts you. You need someone you can share the good times and the bad, and you need someone who's got your back. And I've just seen way too many businesses fall apart when relationships fall apart during that process. So to me, I think it's one of the most important things. And you've been married a long time as well, Joe.
You know, my wife is has you know, I'd be nothing. She made it. And when I was starting to do this, I said, well, I would make pots until I couldn't do it anymore, and I was making a little money. And she said that somebody she was working in a store in between jobs. She worked in between jobs. She didn't, wait, somebody said, they're going to hire at the federal government down the road at the National Park Service. You ought to take the test. And I said, well, you take the test. What do you got to lose? So she took the test, and then she took the job because she got it. And over the course of 25 years, it turned into a career. And that job allowed us, because she had good benefits, allowed us to save the maximum amount we could in her matched 401k. So the third thing you got to do is you have to start to put some money aside as soon as you can. And if anybody's going to give you anything with any kind of a match or anything like that, you need to take care of it. You need to do that. And we lived on my money, and we saved quite a bit of hers. And the other thing is, if you're not a business person, I've been thinking about this. When I started to do this, I knew I was going to be hanging out in the wind all by myself, and if anything happened, that I didn't have any foundation around me, from a company or a business or anything. I was all by myself. So, I went down to the community college and I took a class in personal finance money management. So I learned what the difference between a stock and a bond and a short and a long was, and what a money market was and what a mutual fund was. And the guy, it was like 4 classes. I took it, but I understood at that point that you could just put away a little bit of money every month, every year, every week, however you got paid, and don't touch it, and something good will happen to it. And that's been a huge thing for us, a huge thing, because it's so easy to spend it. And, there's nothing easier to do than spend money when you're broke. It's like, because it doesn't feel like it matters if you don't have any. You know what I mean? It's like, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do. I do. I think everyone's got different personalities, Joe, in terms of money. I've always reinvested almost everything I've made into my businesses because I understand it. I understand my businesses. I understand the ins and the outs, and I understand how that works. But and I've always surrounded myself with far smarter people than I am in terms of accountants, in terms of lawyers. I think you need a great lawyer. I think you need a great doctor. I think you need a great accountant. I think you need to surround yourself with really, really good people. And you need to be on top of your finances at all stages.
What I'm saying for me, though, is that when I started in a little shop in a little seaside town with literally working, for peanuts in comparison to what a lot of business people were, it became apparent to me that I was going to have to take care of a lot of that stuff myself. And that's why I went and I took the Wednesday afternoon, personal finance class to find out what was going on. I mean, I would imagine that you probably have an advanced degree in some kind of business administration or something like that, and you're a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah, I don't. I'm a serial entrepreneur. How would you put that? I love the game, and I have no fear when it comes to investing. But I only invest what I can afford to lose. and I only go into after making some real due diligence. I'm always happy to back myself, and I love that process, Joe. I just love
Yeah,
that process of building
right.
something and seeing it succeed. You know what I love more is, like, I've got four joint ventures, and in those joint ventures, each one of those parties, there's some of my closest mates. There's some of my
Yeah.
closest friends. And I love nothing more than spending, like, I spent a week away just now with Ravi and Robbie Fox in London and Dortmund and Cyprus. Those memories will be with me for the rest of my life.
Right.
And the only reason we did that is because and I took a punt years ago, and we started a business years ago together. And it's the lunches, it's the laughter, it's the dinners, it's the experiences that you have, which I'll remember. It's not the cash, it's not the money. I'm an experience junkie. I love spending time with great people. I love building stuff. The actual financial reward is always great because that's a scorecard. In the end, it's a scorecard.
Right.
But I don't do it to make the million. Say I do it to say, like, even if you look at Bon Roberts now, the cigars. Yeah, look, we have 3 year plans and 5 year plans, but to me, the most important thing is spending that next 3 4 years building something, laughing with Rob Fox, with Hamlet Paredes, with Ravi, doing it in different parts of the world. And if I didn't start it, then all those experiences would never occur.
Right.
And I think you need to put yourself. I'm going to say I'm talking about generally people who are going into business. You know, people always comment on the view once you get there. Oh, you. No one remembers the journey that you had to go through, and I think the journey is the best part. It's not the view at the end of the day. I'm sure,
Well,
Joe. Like
really,
I
once
was
you
going to say, I remember I can picture you in the late 1990s. There was no certainty you were going to make it, and there was no, and I think people forget. Like I don't forget. I think you need to be in business to remember when you first start, when you don't have any real money, and you first start, that feeling of your ass hanging out of your pants is one that stays with you all your life. And I think it's a great feeling. I think and you need to be comfortable in that mode. In that mode.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to go down this. I was not encouraged to do what I did. There were not most of the people, my family, my parents, the various people that I was around. It was, you really ought to do something in college and study something so that when you get out, you really need to wear a tie. That was the background that I came from. It should be an engineer, be an accountant, go to medical school. Heaven forbid, not so much law school, but you do something like that because that's the background of people that I came from. So it wasn't really something that was taken seriously by the place where I came from, But eventually, once I stopped complaining when I was, in my 30s and just got on with it and did it, then it was done. And, I got nothing to look back on and nothing to be ashamed of, as far as where I am in my station in life. And I think what you're saying is that once your bed is warm and dry and you have people that love you and you're fed and your car runs, the rest of it is, it's all right, but it doesn't mean that much. It really doesn't, another
No,
bunch of money. No, what
I,
matters is what you do with your day.
yeah, true. Yeah, Joe. My mother recently said, she's 88. She recently asked me if there's any chance I could go back into banking, because she
Yeah.
still doesn't see cigars as a real job,
Right.
or a
You're
real
not, you
career.
don't,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know. Yeah,
you
go
know.
back and back. find what you know, whatever you're doing, and whatever you're doing, do it to the best of your ability, and find enjoyment in it. Now that's easy to say. I mean, you love what you do. I love what I do. And I know a lot of people have got jobs where they're difficult jobs. They're difficult roles. But I think if you can find something in it that you love and do it to an exceptional level, it, it, it makes it less of work, less of a job.
There
yeah.
is a, there, you know, there is a whole bunch of thinking. You know, people say, what's the meaning of life? People have religion, they have politics, they have, but, you know, back in the old days, there were people that would tell you that the meaning of life was to find something that you can do and do it to the best of your ability. And that if you do that, you will find yourself satisfied. And that's really what it's about. That's the whole thing. And that goes back to the Greek philosophers. You know, it goes way, way back, you know.
I'm a huge believer in that, Joe, but I've got a gut feel that that's not the messaging that's been given to current generation coming through, and where you need to be personally. What's the terminology I'm looking for here? That you need to be. It's really much about self fulfillment, that self enrichment in terms of your mental, your physical, etc. That's your job is supposed to give you all of that. And I think, geez, that's a very high bar for someone in their 20s to try to achieve.
I
It's
think the
so
thing
difficult.
though is that people have got to understand, particularly when they're young. I mean, there was just a thing on the news that said that, you know, the class of 2024 is starting to be fired from the big corporations at a rate that's higher than they've been hired before, because they don't think that the new kids coming along are really understand what it takes to go to work in a business and to succeed. That they, you know, and that you can't wait for things to happen. You have to make them happen. I mean, I remember I was in some trouble at work once, and I said to my old man that the job that I was at, you know, it had no advancement associated with it. It was just a job. And he looked at me and he said, there is no advancement. You make your own. All right. You
Yeah.
know, and the way that you make your own is by doing something. When you do things, things happen. If you wait for things to happen, just about nothing happens. You know, and that's as simple as I can say it. And I was talking to a kid that said they were going to go to Oregon and they were going to try to start a career doing something. And I said, well, that's great. You can go out there, you can get a part-time job, you know, and you can start to look at the way you want to do what you want to do. And I think I probably said something about, well, if you need money, just go down to the supermarket and get a job in the supermarket, or and say, said, I'm not working in no supermarket. And it was like, I wasn't trying to insult him. I was just saying that, you know, there's no indignity to going to work for money when you're young, just to learn how to work for money. It's
That's right. But there's always dignity in honest work, and it doesn't matter what it is. But having said all that, I've got a remarkable group of under 20s. Were they from 17 up to 26 who work for me? And I love that generation. They get it. They are
yeah.
smart. They're sassy. They get it. I love it. And then, of course, on the other scale, there's me and D. You know, I turn 60 next year. D's the same age as I am, and we have a completely different viewpoint, a different way of working. But somehow mixing those under 25s and ourselves works exceptionally well. They strengthen us. They have skills that not that we don't have, but they 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 can engage in new technologies that in 10 minutes it would take me 10 days to try to pick up.
Right. Of course,
And
there's always going to be you know, you can always look at the people that aren't going to go in that direction. And, you know, around here, a lot of the local kids, they think because because this is a seasonal place, what they do is they work all summer and then they collect unemployment insurance all winter and they go to Costa Rica and they go surfing. And I'm
Really?
talking about that kind. Yeah, there's a lot of that that goes along. And I'm talking about that mentality of people that do that, who then bemoan the fact that when they get to their 30s and they want stuff, they can't afford to, they don't have a down payment for a house. They don't have the beginning of it. They don't have, it's just like, well, what happened, and I did what I was supposed to do, and so it's always the same. I got to a place in my life where I just did anything to do what I wanted, what I had to do, because I needed to follow this thing through. And if it had failed when I was 35, I probably would have gone back to some kind of graduate school, but I would have
Yeah.
done something else, and
No. Yeah.
so I tell people I'm grateful that I got away from it. I got away with it for as long as I did.
No, I think you really have to put it all in your 20s and 30s. And you
Yeah,
need to put as much money away as you possibly can
there
during
you
those
go.
years. Um, I've been broke a couple of times in my life, but things didn't go quite as to plan. But what am I? Yeah, so
Yeah,
go hard. You got to go hard. You got to put money away. You really need to focus on your career or your skill sets or yourself. You invest in yourself. I think you said that before, Joe. You got to invest in yourself. You got
right,
to be better. You've got to continue to learn.
right, right.
You're a product. I'm a product. Ideally, you should be trying to get better at what you're
That's right.
doing.
Yeah.
How did you get, because how did you get online? You've got a great website, and I'll be put down here so the boys can have a look at it. The team can have a look at it. I mean, how important is digital to you in terms of
It's
the overall
not
business?
really important at all. And the reason is that because I always had a store, a small store, and I made one of a kind things that people, in the early 2000s were all, well, do you have a website? Do you have a website? And so I got a website going and I would put something on it and someone would buy it. And then someone would see the piece on the website and they would say, well, I want it again. And I would say, well, I have something just like it. And they would say, no, I don't want that. So it became, there are ways to overcome that now. But the decision I made was that I was going to stick to what I was doing and I was going to sell the work out the door of my little gallery. And because every summer legions of people come and they rent houses by the week here and then they come for the day, so the same people come every year. So over the course of 30 years I developed what I call an audience. So I see people that come in all the time and I may not have seen them for 5 years, but they know and they come back. So I have enough of that kind of thing that I really don't have to promote really any other way. And what I do is I put pieces on Instagram, and then
Yeah,
people that know me get in touch and they buy them.
yeah. But I assume no two pieces that you make would be the same.
They're not, and I don't want to make them the same. I'm trying to get over that. So if I put a vase up on Instagram, and a lot of times somebody will buy all of the ones that I post. So I've sort of gotten to that place where I'm collected enough that I know that I'm going to be able to sell the pieces that I make, and I don't have to worry about it too much. And as soon as you start to get into the technical parts of having a website and having a product and having it there and shipping it and dealing with it, it creates a whole second job. So rather than having that be the second job of having a shop cart and a website, the job that I do is I sell things in person right in my own store. And I made
Yeah.
that decision consciously, because the other part of it seemed too tedious and too mechanical. And besides, I waste
Have you
enough time on the computer anyways.
have you noticed your clientele change? Have clients changed over the last 25 years in what their expectations are, what they're looking for, their taste?
people have more money and they're used to or willing to spend more money. So maybe some of my work has gotten better, but I think in general, where I live, people that I knew that had just bought their first, second house, their first, second home, and that they were struggling to do that because they lived in the city and they needed to get the kids out of town or whatever it was that they had, that those people are much more comfortable in where they are and they're not worried about money anymore. Yeah, people are, in my opinion, far more affluent than they were 30 years ago, far more affluent. And you see more of them. So maybe I see a better class of people, maybe, but I don't see a lot of people that come in and say, oh, no, I'm not going to buy that because it's too expensive. They may not buy it because they don't like it, but I don't think money is really the deciding factor. And I think that's because, this is a pretty Tony area. I mean, it's not the Hamptons, but it isn't bad.
Yeah. No,
You know,
it's good. It's very good. When did you join the forum, Joe? How did you find it?
I was on another forum and I bought a box of Punch Super Selection #2 in a 50, and I split it with a guy. And he was an attorney down in the Carolinas. And he sent me a text or an email, and he said, there's a forum in, I don't even remember his name. He said, there's a forum in this one, Australia, Friends of Urbanos. And I came in and I joined that. And I probably did that around 2000, maybe a little later. And there were 4 or 5 of them going on. And there were a couple of them that were really crazy, and I think that one of the things that was good about your forum was that you really like put the hammer down on this thing about US politics, because back in some of the other places there were whole big gangs of people, and they thought that they knew everything, and they were of all of an ilk, they were the same. And it was pretty distressing, to go in. And even today, I kind of stick most of the time to things about cigars, but that was how I came. And it was from those other ones. And most of the other ones are gone. There aren't that many of them. I think the original one started for Cigar Aficionado.
Yeah, CA forum, the CA forum.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys were on that. ICC was another one, remember
I think,
correctly.
yeah,
Yeah.
ICC.
You had the Fuente forum, whatever that
Yeah, that
was.
one I never went
In
off
the,
on too much.
yeah, that was in the 90s were 90s, early 2000s. There was a good 4 or 5 really big forums. But, again, you're right. Each forum would have, what do they call it, like a battleground section where people could say whatever they wanted to say. I can never quite understand that. In that, I think you end up seeing the worst sides of people. Where you can say whatever you think with no ramification. It's not always, especially on forums where people jump on when they've had a few drinks and they really decide to let loose.
Yeah.
There can be some serious pain.
There can be
Serious
some
pain inflicted.
serious pain, and there's a lot of divisiveness in the world. And, it's like, I mean, somebody brought something up about the Mideast a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, and you said, Jesus, I mean, you wrote something to the effect of, what the hell are you thinking? Shut up. you know, that's not what we're doing, and, it just keeps on, it's like being at a dinner table with your friends. Don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion. Just don't do it, because it's not going to end well. Somebody's going to get out of joint. It's just, and I think that having moderators and people that stop that, which is why it's good, having a tyrant that can take care of it, a benign dictator, is a good thing.
We tend more to steer the conversation as opposed to stopping it. Although we very rarely jump down people's throats unless they deserve it. Look, in the end, I think FOH works well because it's actually moderated by the members themselves. It's actually people maintain the culture and people understand the culture. And and you don't even have to be a moderator. If someone new comes on and they step out of line, it's generally the existing members who are not moderators who actually counsel them and bring
Right,
them back in. Well, this is
right.
what the
And
expectations are.
but I think because it was started, number one, by someone that was in the business who used the forum for business, that you set the tone, and that
Yeah,
by setting the tone, it's very important that you've done that, and I think that's why it's been as successful as it is for as long as it is. I mean, it's a pretty
yeah.
constant source of amusement. It really is.
It abuses me. It does. Well, Joe, thank you very much for taking the time today on the deep dive. I think I just love it. I love these sessions. It's like a fireside chat. We get to know a little bit more about each other. I know our members get to know a little bit more about you, and I hope that well, I know they will jump down, click the link, and go and see exactly what you do in your part of the world. And as a proud
Well,
owner of one of your pieces,
well, I
it's
appreciate that.
I really think you've got a special gift,
I
and you do
really
some
don't.
beautiful
You
work.
say click, there is no link to click. You have to go find me on Instagram.
I'm sure we'll come up with something
Yeah,
to get.
don't worry about it too much.
Don't worry about it too much. It's all good. And if you're up his neck of the woods, pop in. When are you open, by the way? You're only open about 2 weeks a year, aren't you?
Yeah, some maybe a week and a half. It depends on how ambitious I'm feeling. Now I'm open. My business runs when the tourists are here. The heavy tourists are when school's out of session. So, 4th of July to Labor Day, which is the first Monday in September. And usually I do a lot more business in the fall than I do in the spring. So it's very nice around here right now. There's a lot of people around that are buying things. So it's really starting to end up, for real now. We're coming up on the Columbus Day holiday, and that's kind of it. It's going to start to get cold.
Good stuff. Well, if you're up his neck of the woods, shoot
I
him a
would love to
PM,
come down. If
pop
I come
in,
down to
take it out.
Australia someday, I'll give you a call.
Look forward to it, Joe. Look forward to it. Many thanks, mate.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.